One of the things we're championing at the moment is this idea of context engineering, which is an experienced design practice that attempts to break the perceptual conventions and that limit innovation within the social and knowledge construction agendas. An example of this sort of technology is this headset that we're testing at the moment, which is called Fly Viz headset 360. Basically what it does, it allows you to compress 360 view into 180 degrees. So you start to see in 360. It takes 15 minutes for the brain to adjust. So unlike the Oculus Rift, there's very little nausea, amazingly. Obviously we shape our tools and thereafter they start to shape us. Perspective itself is, the one we've chosen is one-point perspective, linear perspective, and ever since the Renaissance we've been duped because one-point perspective is not accurate. In fact, we actually see in curvilinear perspective, and a really simple trick is to actually put a meter ruler underneath your nose, and you'll notice the end of the ruler starts to curve upwards. So we actually see in curvilinear perspective. So all of our media is badly designed. In fact, photography is all related to one-point perspective, which is obviously a bit of an issue. So how can we hack into those conventions? This is a 360-degree film. So obviously we're used to being able to look at films from the director's point of view, but now we can actually look from our own point of view and zoom in and out. We can turn around and look at the film crew. A friend of mine who studies film said, this is the end of film. I said, no, it's not, because you don't have to touch it. You can actually stick with the director's view if you want. I'm really interested in how badly designed modern technology is. For instance, we've got technologies and pedagogies from the ancient Greek orators, for instance, that were actually mapping their 7-hour speeches to different architectural features in a bit of virtual architecture that they had in their head. So typically in an amphitheatre, they would map different parts of their speech to different architectural features, and then all they needed to do was remember the pathway through that structure. So they weren't writing anything down. They were using visualization, and if you think about the technologies we're accessing now, things like augmented reality, we're sort of coming back to that as an option. So I'm just going to go over three single sort of areas, which is this idea of intermediality, which is linked to hybrid reality. We've got some analog and digital context engineering examples, and then I'll talk about some body hacking and some reality hacking as a result. So hybrid reality is this eruption of the digital into the digital into the physical. So you've got motifs here from the digital CAD space being put into the analog space. So this architect's exploring the interface between space, perception, and context. Or here, where we've got architects actually using the output of a real-world event for the design in a physical structure. This building's in Korea. Or we've got this sort of example. So intermediality is this idea of taking the output of one media and putting it into another. Parallel tracking and mapping is a really interesting computer vision algorithm that was designed by George Klein at Oxford, who's now working at Microsoft. And effectively what it allows you to do, what your mobile is now able to do, is make 3D models of everything it sees. So this guy's just scanning his desk, and you can see all those little points on the desk are becoming a 3D model. So he's making a 3D model on the fly of his desk, just with his iPhone. This is an old video. This is why augmented reality is now very accurate. It's no longer a gimmick. Another example is this idea in clay vision. So here, this is what we used to have with augmented reality. It was this bubble metaphor, which was rubbish, and basically it wasn't really doing anything for the name or for the brand of the technology that augmented reality is, which is a new way of seeing. So combining parallel tracking and mapping. So this is an iPad basically using that computer vision algorithm. It's it's creating a model of that city on the fly using parallel tracking and mapping. And then you can start to actually manipulate the real world in real time. So this is what's really interesting. I mean, it's this idea of, I call it context engineering, which is we're used to being able to augment content. We're used to being able to create content. We're not used to being able to control our senses, which is what is coming with this technology. So for instance here, we've got a lab in Japan And what they're doing is they're increasing the size of your food whilst you eat it, so that you don't eat so much of it. And they're getting very good results. Things like Google Glass, which I think is horrible for many reasons, but what it is doing is it's creating this revolution in spatial literacy, or it certainly will do, it's widespread. And you can see here that this photograph's not being taken with somebody's hands, it's being taken by the glasses. And we're going to have problems with not being able to forget anything anymore, because everything will be recorded. These glasses will take pictures all the time, and it's very important to forget, actually. It's really important to forget, for learning especially. And if you think about what I've just shown you, which is this idea of parallel tracking and mapping, combining with this sort of technology, so when it gets good, it's not good at the moment, but when it does, you can imagine these glasses making 3D models of everything you're seeing. So you're going to get to the point where you'll be able to personalize your world to a very vast extent. So, for instance, I joke, but if you don't like men, you'll be able to delete them. You'll have a little sign to say there is a man here, avoid them, or you can turn them into whatever you want. I mean, this is what's coming. So it's this idea of no common ground again. I mean, we've already lost a lot of it, but in terms of knowledge construction, etc., common ground is actually very useful. Google have already started patenting gesture. They've actually patented this gesture for their Google Glass. They're not allowed to do it in the UK. We won't let them, it's ridiculous, but in America this has already been done, so we're talking about a new level of human-computer interaction, and we're talking about gestures being patented. I mean, it's insane. So another example of context engineering is this. We all know how problematic listening to digital music is, in the sense that it's become meaningless in a sense. It's become flat. There's no physicalization of music anymore. This is an example of context engineering. You're forced to stay still if you want to hear the music. The opposite of that is Calvin Harris has created an album where you have to dance all the time in order to hear the music. So it's all about this, the other side of the context, not the content. How can we change the context onto that content? We've got an artist in Berlin who's actually, I call it conversation spacification, so he's actually making sure that everyone's at the same height when they enter a party. So this isn't just digital, this isn't just all digital, and it's certainly not all like high tech. I'm really interested in analog and digital interventions that are a lot of lo-fi stuff. We've got the ability now to become a dolphin and experience the shape and the context of a dolphin. And we can recontextualize what already exists with simple designs. There's a brilliant project at the Royal College of Art called IDAS Outcomes, which is very worth looking at. And what they've done is they've created two interventions, which is a hearing intervention and a visual intervention. And they've got the right idea. What if we had the same control over our senses as we do over content? So they're talking about adjusting your senses in real time. And this is one example of it, which is they do time lapse. So they're slowing time down visually, so you can start to see the traces of objects as it's happening. There's another example of that decelerator helmet, another good reference. This guy, I mean, it's incredible stuff. It's the brain is now, like I told you, started on, it's this idea, if we can hack the brain in 15 minutes to start to see in 360, and the brain says, yeah, that's fine, then what else can we hack? It's like it's waiting to be hacked. There's a long history in this. We've got in the 60s, Walter Pitchler talking about this stuff. In the 60s, we've got examples of becoming, seeing through fly vision. We've got this, which is all about beauty, and I really like this idea that it sort of rings true to what I'm saying. Reimagining what already exists and using perspective to shape reality instead of changing reality itself. It's all about now recycling. Let's hack perspective. Let's hack the way we see things rather than concentrate constantly on content. And we've got all these sort of side effects of technology that we didn't sort of expect. Like in Tetris, apparently, it fixes the lazy eye problem. So the Oculus, I'm really interested in the field of view technologies primarily because of this perceptual interest I've got and consciousness interest. So I don't know how many people have tried the Oculus yet. Not many. So it's coming. It's getting good. They've got an HD version coming out. You put it on, and it's a revelation because you become your vision. You put your eyes on there, and there's no body anymore. You've got no access to your body. I was on a roller coaster ride in a demo, and I was standing up, and the guys running the demo said, "You have to sit down," and I was like, "I'm not going to sit down. I'm just going to tell my brain it's a simulation," and they let me do it, and I went straight up, and it's more extreme than the real roller coaster, but you start to come down, and it turned, and I fell over, and they had to catch me because my brain says it is happening, and you can't override that. There's even better versions of the Oculus coming out. You know, it's going to be massive, this sort of stuff. So, just to finish off, really, this is the last section, which is this idea of body hacking. So, this is an experiment, a brilliant lab in Sweden, and what they're doing, this is somebody who's using an Oculus type device, and the reason why it works is because there's no peripheral vision in the glasses. And what he's doing, he's put these glasses on, and he's looking through two webcams, and the webcams are 10 foot behind him. And literally, that is what he's seeing. And he's seeing himself, and he's going, "Who's that?" Because his consciousness has gone out of his body directly into the webcams. Because your brain's saying, "I'm over there." Your brain's constantly trying to work out where you are. It uses all the available cues. And it's a question of, how can we research this stuff? How can we find out how long it takes for the brain to catch up? I think my last little clip is of this. So this is a brand new experiment, and these are two people wearing the Oculus, and they're body swapping. So I mentioned this yesterday in one of our sessions, this idea about a body, and people, obviously were a bit confused, but this is the kind of stuff that's very, very lo-fi, it's very cheap to do. And what these people are doing is giving each other instructions where to touch each other first, and they're sharing, they're looking through the other person's view. So this all links up with neuroscience. We've got mirror neurons. If you don't know about mirror neurons, what mirror neurons are, effectively when you have done something, if you've done played tennis, and then you watch a game of tennis, when you play tennis, you build a neural network of tennis. And once you actually start to watch that tennis match, especially if you see close-ups, you trigger the same neural network in your brain as if you're actually doing it. So what are the implications with these technologies, with these watching technologies? We can imagine situations where people are going to sell their view. Famous people are going to sell their view, and they're going to have cameras on their eyes, and people are going to pay to pay-per-view that person. And it's a case of, from our interesting point of view, it's like, for instance, like, looking through a disabled person's eyes, or looking through somebody's eyes, that you need to know how hard their day is. I mean, obviously this is just vision we're talking about, but you can still pick up a lot of information from that sense. Or this is another game on the Oculus called Among the Sleep, where you experience the world through a 2-year-old child's eyes. We've got Julius von Bismarck in Berlin, who's been doing this for a while, so he walks around Berlin in this apparatus, and we've got a camera in here looking down on him, so he's doing this out-of-body stuff in a real literal sense. But before anyone says, "Oh, this is a bit too high and fancy," we've actually got some scientific evidence now, and I picked this up from Lewis in a COST event, in another ICT event in Croatia recently. Olaf Blank has actually made this a scientific fact. So actually we've got neuromodulation now, where we use direct brain stimulation to trigger out-of-body experiences. So we've located the area in the brain which will actually trigger an out-of-body experience. So it's not just the Oculus, we've got other evidence. So what this means is that we're actually getting to the point when we're getting to see this as a reality. And I'm thinking, what are the implications for innovation? What are the implications for collaboration if we can start to share each other's perceptions? I've got a friend at Ravensbourne who's linking the Oculus up to a drone, and he's controlling the drone with his head movements. So these drones have got quite a good range now, and you can imagine your disembodied view flying around your own city with this sort of technology. And we've got people strapping cameras to hawks, and then you're in a hawk's eye view. And picking up on what we're going to talk about this afternoon, which is this idea of strong and weak signals, you could argue that a lot of what I've just talked about in terms of the technology is a weak signal, not because of necessarily health and safety or nausea aspects, but because when you remove peripheral vision, it is a reliable way of hacking the brain, but the scientists have found that there's a neurotransmitter that's essential And peripheral vision, not just visual but auditory peripheral, is essential for cognition. So this could be a major problem with this sort of technology. So just to finish off, I'm really interested in this idea of spatial literacy and doing these dimensional and spatial transformations. This is an example of a painting where the painting itself is contemplating itself. So we've got, it's a combination of a painting, a relief, and a sculpture. And it's this, the spatial transformations within a work of art. And we've got this sort of stuff. There's a brilliant design house called Berg, and they're producing macroscopic artworks. So you've got the overview and the local view at the same point of view. You can be in your local view, but you can have your overview. So we're not used to that. We're used to having a limited point of view and not having access to the multiple point of view. So it's this idea, within one field of view, to be both in the world and to see yourself in it. The power of looking through and occupying your own field of vision. So all of what I've been talking about links in totally with experience design, and we're moving from what we've been used to, which is information communication, to experiential communication. So I've been talking about post-digital design mostly, and these tools are designed to humanize technology. It's the combination between this hybrid reality, context engineering, fundamentally allowing us to change our ways of seeing and knowing. And I think it's really exciting that we're going to get away from these screens. I'm sick of zombie nation where everyone's staring at these screens, no longer seeing the world. And fluidity of thinking does relate to the fluidity of movement. And all of this is a massive design problem. How do we redesign technology so we don't have zombies walking around everywhere? Those are my details if you want to get in touch. And feel free to add me on Facebook, and thank you very much.